Hello and welcome to the Spark of Ages podcast. In this episode, we'll be exploring Plantible, a San Diego-based food technology company with our guest Tony Martens, who co-founded Plantible. Plantible Foods is a B2B food technology company which is in the process of developing the most functional and applicable plant protein in the world, helping to transition our world to a better place. As usual, we'll discuss what fascinates me most, and in Plantible's case, it's their technological innovations, their vision of change to the world, and especially, I'm going to be interested in their go-to-market strategy and how they bring that dream to reality. Tony is going to introduce us to Lemna, a leafy green aquatic plant which Plantible uses to produce the nutrient-dense complete program Rubisco, also known as Ruby protein. It requires 10 times less water than soybeans and 100 times less water than beef. So Lemna is incredibly sustainable.
So this is going to be my new Chia seeds. Like, it's going to be on everything.
You're going to have this. You're going to mix this in every one of your drinks, and it's not going to affect the taste.
Amazing.
That's the part that's interesting.
Important.
Some of the key takeaways you can expect from this episode: what's wrong with our current food systems, the challenges of getting to scale in the food industry, how Plantible is implementing their go-to-market strategy, and what can we learn from that. And finally, we're going to learn a lot about Tony and what got him to start this company in the first place. As always, I'm your host, Rajiv Parikh, the CEO and founder of Position Squared, an AI-driven growth marketing company based in Silicon Valley. I'm fascinated by how big, world-changing movements go from the spark of an idea to an innovation that reshapes our lives. In every episode, we do a deep dive with our guest about what led them to their own eureka moments and how they are going about executing it, and perhaps most importantly, how they get other people to believe in them so their idea can also become a spark for the ages. Tony, welcome to Spark of Ages. So, Tony, you and Moritz van de Ven came out to the US from the Netherlands with the idea of starting this company. What was the problem that you felt that gave you that burning need to leave that amazing country that you came from to come here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like if you can break down the food industry or the agricultural industry's problems in four sections, right? So I think the first one is obviously it's a large contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. I think it's responsible for nearly 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Obviously, alongside with that, number one consumer of fresh water and number one factor impacting biodiversity. So there's a lot of, let's say, environmental and sustainability issues with our food system. At the same time, the majority of our crops are all seeded and harvested once a year, meaning that they're also very much influenced by climate change because obviously you have a year to recuperate, right? So in between, you don't have any crops, or your crops might have been of lower quality. So I think that's a big issue where you have this self-fulfilling downward spiral where it's contributing to climate change, and then climate change is contributing to, let's say, or affecting the quality and yield of underlying crops. And to put things into perspective, like 60% of our global calorific intake is coming from four crops: corn, soy, wheat, and rice. And they're all seeded and harvested once a year. So as you can imagine, it's almost like having 60% of your wealth invested in four stocks that generate revenue 1 month out of the year. If something goes wrong,
it's like month, Christmas time, but in a very short. Christmas time for e-commerce firms.
Yeah, why do you have to call out my portfolio like that? That hurts.
Wait, don't you have just basically Nvidia and more Nvidia and more Nvidia?
So, and then I think what's starting to happen as well is that because of the over-indexing on only a select set of crops or nutrient sources, you're starting to see a widespread outbreak of diseases, once again affecting the yield and quality of these crops, and then getting back into that negative loop of having annual harvest cycles. And then I think lastly, I think this is becoming a more prevalent risk, is the fact that you have these food supply chains that are highly concentrated in a couple of regions around the world, where you're now starting to see the impact of geopolitical risk, right? I think you've had this during the Trump administration, where the United States prevented China from importing soybeans, whereas China is the largest consumer or importer of soybeans. And then suddenly you have to go to somewhere else, obviously against elevated prices. Or most recently, with the war in Ukraine, the grain shed of Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, with, the war there affecting the supply and availability of mainstream commodities for people that are already living difficult situations.
Right, like Sub-Saharan Africa, right, was totally affected, because of the pandemic. India stopped rice exports, right? They said, no, we're going to keep it here. So because we want to make sure we feed ourselves first. So huge issues.
Yeah, huge issues. And so I think like those issues then triggered like, okay, how can you disrupt the agri-food supply chain, right? And I think what hasn't gone well in the past when people try to do this, because don't forget, I think truly agriculture and food production is probably one of the last, if not the last, industry that hasn't gone through a fundamental disruption, right? So yes, there's been optimization. Yes, there's been mechanization, but the crops that we grow and the foods that we produce have been the same for hundreds of years. Yeah, exactly. And so I think truly, so that was our philosophy. And I think what hasn't gone right in the past is that people fall in love with the novel organisms, so plants or whatever they grow, instead of thinking about what's the product that I'm selling and do people care about my product besides sustainability or decentralized supply chains. And I think what we try to do is find, let's say, that common ground where we create something that people want to use and then create the most sustainable, resilient supply chain.
You weren't looking at, let's go find a use for duckweed.
No.
Right?
You
went in with the problem set.
Yeah.
Right? You were saying, hey, how can I solve this problem about protein in foods today, right? Because as societies get wealthier, they want more and more protein. I have this resource problem. I have this climate issue. I have wars. How do I deal with this issue of getting to protein? And then you looked at what is going to enable me to build the kind of protein that can be sustainable, enabled at scale, et cetera. And you probably saw the substitute meat market as our plant-based meat market as a way to go.
I think he just went to Whole Foods. He moved to the U.S. He went to Whole Foods once, saw his grocery bill, and he's like, I'm going to start a whole company so that it's cheaper. This is too expensive. I can't raise a family like this.
I'll be very
that's
candid.
my thing.
I did move to LA first, and then I went to Erewhon and Lassens, where I was
God.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
You emptied out. You sold all that NVIDIA stock and were able to get a meal.
And he did it before NVIDIA was huge.
It was a thing. Exactly. Yeah.
No, so were you looking at the solution, and then you came upon this notion of coming to duckweed and using the notion of
what is Plantible,
Rubisco,
I guess, is the question.
Yeah. Right? What is Plantible about? How did you what got you to start?
Yeah, so I think like Moritz, so we've been friends for 16 years, although obviously the past 6 years have been a little bit more intense than friends. But I think
it's like a wife and husband relationship.
Yeah,
right?
Don't tell my wife. My wife keeps on telling me that she's my mistress and Plantible is my actual wife. But I think, anyway, Moritz and I, we've always been contemplating starting a company together, right? Like ranging from anything you can imagine. And then I think slowly but surely we started to gravitate towards how can we develop a company that actually leaves the planet in a better place than the way we found it, right? And so how can we do something that's more impactful than creating another app? No disrespect to apps. And then we started to think about like renewable energy, right? But renewable energy, I think the value add besides cost reduction, I think that is not necessarily that abundant anymore. I think the output is always the same. So you're in this downward spiral to create cheaper and cheaper energy in a more efficient way, where you already have, let's say, 2 or 3 sources like sun, wind, and nuclear that are very, very efficient and affordable. And I was working in agricultural commodity trading, so that really drove us towards the food system as a whole. That's when you start to think about like, okay, it is so resource intensive. Why is it so resource intensive? Why are we relying on animal proteins, or why are we relying on these handful of commodities, right? So the majority of the commodities that we grow all end up as animal feed one way or another.
Right.
And then these animals we use, A, because they provide a certain level of nutrition, but B, because they also create textures that we like to eat, right? So if you think about food, you have flavors and then you have textures, right? If you eat a potato chip, you want it to be crispy. You would be unpleasantly surprised if you think it's a chip, but then you bite it and it's tofu, right? So
soggy potato chips don't have a great market. Yeah,
exactly. So texture, and so animal proteins, they play like a critical role. And the reason why is because they have certain functional properties like foaming, emulsifying, gelation. And then we started to think, okay, if that's fundamentally the reason why we're using, let's say, these animal proteins in commercial scale food production, why don't we find something in nature that can nutritionally and functionally compete or even outperform these animal proteins? And then soon we landed on this protein known as Rubisco, or as we prefer to call it, Ruby. And Rubisco, funnily enough, is in every leafy green. So it's one of the most abundant proteins on the planet because it's the catalyst in the photosynthesis process. So it captures CO2 and then converts it into sugar so that plants can grow. And what makes Rubisco so special and why it's been considered the holy grail of proteins for the past 60 to 70 years is that it's actually functionally and nutritionally superior to any of the animal proteins currently on the market.
Really?
Oh.
What? In what way?
Yeah, so if you think about it, so from like your body needs a certain amount of essential amino acids on a daily basis, right? And if you think about just food as efficiency, because don't forget that human bodies aren't perfect, and if you eat X amount of protein, depending on the source, your body might only take up X percentage of the protein that you're consuming, and the rest it discards, right? And so if you can find more efficient protein sources that the body fully absorbs, automatically the human body needs to consume less, right? And so what makes Rubisco so unique is that you need the least amount of grams of protein in order to provide you with your recommended daily intake of essential amino acids. Because it's so digestible by the human body, it's obviously also allergen-free. So it's super cool where we did this study with like a third-party laboratory to really assess, let's say, the health benefits and the digestibility of Rubisco compared to beef, chicken, eggs, dairy, and whatnot.
When you say you came to Rubisco, are you that's like where you landed? Is it like how when you were a wedding tasting for your wedding and you're just like sampling all these different potential superfoods? Like how did you land upon this, previously unused duckweed? To find this stuff.
It's like I told you the story before. No, just kidding. But I think the way, so my co-founder Moritz, his uncle is a professor at the University of Wageningen, which is an agricultural university in the Netherlands. And so he went to his uncle saying like, hey, okay, we have this idea. What do you think? Where should we start? This and that. And then it's like, okay, well, there has been some precedent research on Rubisco from a health benefit as well as from a texturizing agent perspective. That's when we started to look. And if you look at all of the research paper and all the research that has been done, it all shows super promising and great, right? And so me and my co-founder were just ignorant. They were like, wow, if this is so great, why has nobody ever commercialized this before?
Yeah, my understanding from some of this is that it's inside the leafy green, or it's inside the plant. And then once you expose it, it degrades really quickly. Yeah. Right. And that's why a lot of other folks who have been trying to do something similar, they're having to put in all these masking agents, and they have to process it in particular ways. Whereas you folks have found a way to extract it from the source. Is that?
Yeah. It's you're getting there. In the end, what it comes down to, like to have high quality Rubisco, as you mean, where it's neutral in flavor, neutral in color, neutral in odor, as well as super functional and nutritional, there needs to be a very short window in which you harvest the plant and then convert it into, let's say, your final product in your Rubisco protein. And so Lemna, because it's like this continuous growing plant that can be harvested every day of the week, every moment in time, you can perfectly time it with your downstream process, which then maximizes the quality and maximizes the yield of your Rubisco protein on a fresh biomass basis. And so that's how we connected the dots.
That's amazing. So then you went with this notion. You thought that you can create this process that would enable you to extract, and then you came upon the notion of duckweed. And was that also part of this thing? Well, here's the most efficient way of doing this, and you could do this in a pond, or like when I see your videos, I see this image of this green item on a pond, right? Is that how it sort of, you're like, hey, how can I be super efficient with this?
We soon realized that existing supply chains or agricultural side streams just don't make economic or food safe sense. And so that really got us to diving into the world of novel plants or Rubisco containing organisms. And then, the thing that popped up immediately was algae, which has been like the poster child of the food industry for the past decades, but never really anything happened to algae. And the reason why it didn't work in our techno-economic model is that algae is like a three-dimensional organism, right? So it grows in the water. And so what that means is that if you want to harvest the algae or move the algae, you need to move a lot of water constantly, which then really inflates the amount of energy that goes into your production process. Now, here comes Lemna, which is a two-dimensional organism, right? So it's a small leaf that floats on the surface of the water. So you can leave the water in one place and just skim the surface and harvest the lemna that way instead of moving a lot of water around, which really reduces the overall energy balance and your unit economics when it comes to cultivating these organisms. And so then it's really rich in protein. It's a very efficient and sustainable growing organism. And that's how we got started. And then, we got in touch with this German professor who was the appointed successor of the godfather of Lemna, which was an Austrian professor named Andreas Landolt. We got in touch with him to really learn more about Lemna, what strains work, because it's as a plant, it consists of over 1,000 different strains, all with different compositions, sizes, growth rates. So, once again, whole black box that we dove into. And that's how we got started. We sourced a couple of strains, found a deserted greenhouse in the eastern part of the Netherlands, and quit our jobs. And before we knew it, we found ourselves knees deep in a pond in an eastern Netherlands greenhouse.
You're suddenly, skimming leaves out of a pond all of a sudden. It's an absolutely incredible journey.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share some numbers, and you can tell me about the industry and correct me if you will. So from what we're reading, according to Spins and the Good Food Institute, so U.S. sales of plant-based foods or plant-based protein foods went from $4 billion or $3.9 billion in 2017 to $8.1 billion in 2023, but it declined a little bit from 2022, but it's still projected to grow to about $35 billion by 2030, I think. Maybe my team can correct me on this, but it's supposed to grow substantially. Now, this is in a market where the overall retail sales of total meat, all types of distribution systems, is about $170 billion, right? So it's small but growing. It has a lot of attention. And so when you're looking at the overall problem set, right, you have this notion of a fast rise for protein alternatives. You have some bit of, I guess, some stagnation right now in the market. But overall, there's a projection of growth. Is that because, do you feel like things have slowed down a bit because of kind of going from the early adopter to the early majority kind of thing? Or do you feel like it's some of the problems with it and that you have to add a lot of ingredients, a lot of processing to it? Like the Beyond Meat stock, right, was at one point like $150. It's $6 today. It's less than 1 times revenue in terms of its market cap. It's just interesting.
Discount.
Right?
Yeah. Good question. I think
it's a lot.
It's a lot to chew on.
No, it's
so
good.
To speak.
A lot to chew on. It's highly. It has a lot of umami to it.
Tough to digest.
Yeah, it's almost like a plant-based burger. A lot of ingredients in. I get it. No, I mean, like on that point, right? I think it's like in the end, what happens? Like if you think about meat production, right, and whether you use plants or whether you use an animal as the catalyst, I mean, it's a little bit of an unfair comparison because, like a cow, you can feed anything, right? So you can feed a cow whatever you want. In the end, on the label, it just says cow, right? But if you feed the same ingredients to a machine, suddenly you need to label all of the ingredients that you fed to the machine, right? So, like to give you an anecdote, it's like a couple of months ago, you read like obviously avian flu is now an annually recurring thing, and there was a news article about like, hey, avian flu now also affecting cattle, and I was like, okay, like how is that possible, right? I was always under the impression that it's like a bird specific disease, right. And then I learned that in the meat industry they take like chicken litter, which is, let's say, covering the floor in chicken farms. And then they feed that to cows, right? But
they're basically spoon feeding them avian flu. They're like, here, have some more avian flu with your meal.
Yeah. But it's not like you don't go to the grocery store and pick up, let's say, a piece of steak and it says like fat chicken litter or something like that, So I think
they do have they do have like grass-fed free. So I think we are paying a little bit more attention, right? To
some people are.
Okay, maybe it's just my household. We are, it's just LA or something, but we are paying attention to what is being. But yeah, no, to your point,
but that's
it's,
like
it's not the
nice
same.
thing, right? It's like the nice thing. They say it's grass fed, but then at least it's probably not only grass fed, right? So
Right.
I think like
some grass, some
avian flu.
Long story. So I think why do I think there's some headwinds right now? I think the biggest issue what you've seen is that there was like also in COVID when all of like the Beyond and Impossible, they all came to market. They raised billions of dollars, and people were at home. There was a lot of marketing push, of course. Sure. I think supply chains were under pressure, and so people were more experimental, trying to find different ways and to feed themselves. But then the repeat purchases were never there, right? So they tried it once, maybe they tried it twice, and then they were like, it's not the way my Black Angus burger tastes or something like that. And so then people were like, you know what, sustainability alone is not a key enough driver for people to shift their dietary patterns. Which brings me to my point. I think for some reason, as an industry, people adopted the word alternative, right? And but if you think about it, when Tesla launched their Roadster, they didn't say, hey, this is an alternative car. Or when they launched, let's say, the iPhone, they said like, hey, this is an alternative phone, because alternative automatically implies like, hey, not plan A, but
not as good as what you have.
Yeah.
Or no, you actually want the other thing, but here's something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So
here's the desirable item, but no, I'm stuck.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think if you think about it as well, once again, from a bigger perspective, right? So when Tesla, and I had a conversation, funnily enough, earlier today about somebody, like if you look at Tesla and Tesla's branding, nowhere do you see like leaves or environmental expressions,
It's not
like
green
cool.
At all. They don't have green as a color in their
it's cool.
In their selection.
It looks great, No, exactly. You're right. It's like it just looks cool, it looks designerish. And most importantly, the cars look nice and they're super fast, right? So they provide some value to the consumer that buys the car and then and has fun with it. Whereas the Nissan Leaf, is a slightly less popular car than the Tesla, right?
Well, it sort of implies a sacrifice that you're making for the alternative, as opposed to, you're right, like with at least pre-Musk being Musk, buying the Tesla was like, it was like all those cool things you mentioned, and on top of that, and it's greener. Like that was the sort of plus.
Yeah, but it was not. It was not the primary decision driver, right? And so, and I think
it was better than a typical car. It was a transformation.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. It's like on top of the I can go as fast as a Porsche, and I'm saving money on gas and saving the environment. Yeah,
and I can make a fart. And I can make a fart noise with my horn too.
Different purchasing drivers, I guess.
Different ideal customer profile for Rajiv Parikh.
Anyway, but I think so. If you think about going back to like two things that I think were the primary issue, there was no direct value for the consumer besides ethical or sustainability drivers, right? It was just like, okay. But then at the same time, they had to compromise on the final quality or on the experience. And I think the latter, like if you look at most successful CPG companies, right? They're primarily like sales and marketing organizations that have found some kind of food scientist somewhere that developed just a delicious product that consumers want to consume over and over and over again. Right. And they grow up testing that product at like farmers markets, immediately getting feedback from the local consumers, and then refine their product to make sure that it constantly follows, let's say, the feedback that they're getting. If you then go back to the plant-based meat industry, just a bunch of scientists going into the lab, raising hundreds of millions of dollars, not starting off, and probably they had some fancy consumer panel feedback, but consumer panels, they don't go to the grocery store and make the purchases, right? They just eat something and then give you feedback. Whereas at the farmer's market, people actually buy your product and swap money in exchange for your product. And so they skipped that whole early stage consumer validation and just immediately went to large scale expansion, which comes with venture dollars. And so I think the issue was that the quality just wasn't there. And then, there wasn't any value beyond being ethical or sustainable. And
it's a great answer. Is that becoming your market, that you're going to replace either the soy protein or the pea protein, or in these burgers, or do you see this a whole different level of functional usage? Like in one of your articles, it talks about how this could be a replacement for egg whites in McDonald's hotcakes.
Yeah.
Right. So is this part of adding more protein in your diet and scaling from there?
Yeah,
or
no,
is it
you
both?
asked me that question. Oh, you asked me that question earlier, and I don't think I answered it back then. It's like, what kind of company are you, right? And so I think it's a great question because I think you're constantly transitioning as a company. And maybe initially when we started Plantable, you're like, oh, we're a plant-based protein company, right? But now what we're seeing is like, okay, actually what we're doing is we're developing a new agricultural manufacturing platform that allows us to create next generation food ingredients for food, for feed, and maybe for other industries like cosmetics, right?
Cosmetics,
and I think,
right, that's a whole thing that you probably never thought of. Yeah.
No, exactly. And so I think like what's interesting about that. So if you think like, are we competing with soy and pea? No, because I don't think like soy and pea are necessarily bad for the environment. What we want to do is we actually want to reduce our reliance on animal-based ingredients, right? Or synthetic ingredients that are causing, let's say, a lot of health issues today in the United States. Because they're used in ultra processed foods and whatnot. And I think that's where we really want to focus as Plantables. Like, hey, we're not here to replace, plant-based because, that's not where the market is. And I don't think that's the problem that we're trying to solve. But the problem that we're trying to solve is reduce the reliance on animals in our food system. And I think
so new use cases as you're going through, or this is part of an entire growth story. Because as we talked about, this is only a couple percent of the market today. Yeah. So there's a huge market to grow into.
Yes,
and enable.
Hopefully, yeah.
So so let's talk about your scaling. So you raised a Series A. You went early stage. You raised your Series A. You got some supplemental funding along the way because people saw your progress. And as you're scaling up, you need additional capital. Now you're getting close to a Series B, or maybe you already have a Series B. Like, talk about how you've worked with scaling and the challenges of scaling and building a business like this.
Yeah, it's super tough. So it goes back to like when we started, like we were obviously very lucky because we found like this 2-acre R&D facility in San Diego for free. And so we already started off with like a little bit of a head start from a skill perspective. But I think then in 2020, we raised our seed round after developing a lab-based process for 2 years in a Breaking Bad trailer on our farm in San Diego.
You had to have the Breaking Bad too. Right? Full chemistry sense.
Just in your underwear with plant-based food.
On Sundays. That's how we started. And then in 2020, we raised our seed round. And this was with the idea to build a pilot plant, right? A pilot processing plant. So we literally raised the money 2 days before Governor Newsom announced his lockdown. And so then, then we're like, okay, happy, this and that. And then suddenly Governor Newsom says, okay, non-essential businesses got to close shop. And so we're like, oh shit, what are we going to do? Right? And we went that same night, we went on to Craigslist. We found 2 RVs, $6,000 each. Could barely make it to the farm, but we found them. And we lived on our farm for like 9 months to build out our pilot plant, right? We had some of our colleagues live with us. Back then, we were a small team, 6 people. And so we were living with the 4 of us on our farm for like 6 to 9 months, using the garden hose as a shower. Maybe too much information, but anyway. And so we built a pilot plant, which then put us like obviously that gave us a huge head start, right? Because a lot of other companies, they were like, okay, we need to do like different schedules for people coming into the office so that we minimize contamination. We just said like, okay, we're just going to be one family. We're living on the farm and let's go.
You had your own pod. You built your...
Yeah, we had our own pod. So like where we worked was where we lived, right? So I think that then gave us a huge head start.
This is your version of Musk living in the factory room floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds pretty comfortable.
And getting a low-cost factory, right? I mean, he got the former Numi factory for nothing, essentially, $25 million. So
that sounds pretty comfortable, right? I mean, I'm quite sure they had some of these safety showers in those factories, no garden hoses, right? So I mean, anyway, but I think it's our Google garage story, right? So anyway, we were living, we were living there, and so that gave us a huge head start because we were able to develop the pilot plant. And candidly, when you build a pilot plant, everything that you did on the bench goes out of the window. You have to really start from scratch again because there's just way many different reactions that take place. So anyway, but that put us on an accelerated track for 2 things. A, we were able to produce larger quantities of sample material that can help our customers accelerate their evaluation and get to a commercial commitment faster. But at the same time, it also really allowed us to accelerate the de-risking of our core technology, which then, allowed us, when we were going to the market raising our Series A, to show that commercial traction, but also communicate the technology de-risking and setting us up for building out a commercial facility, which is obviously where I think we started to diverge maybe a little bit from the rest of the market that was still, let's say, more of R&D mode. And we just took a very bold decision with our Series A raise. So like, hey, you know what? We're going to build a commercial facility, which then over the past year allowed us to start to ship out commercial quantities to our early stage customers and really generate some revenue, but also set us up for, let's say, larger quantities of commercial agreements and putting us now on a trajectory to achieve cash flow positivity, right? So I think from a scaling perspective, we took quite some risks, and obviously a lot of things also went horribly wrong, but it's now put us in this position where we're at a point in time where we can de-risk, we can claim that we've de-risked our technology, and it's more a matter of scaling out versus scaling up, which is an exciting time to be in.
What's like one thing that went horribly wrong that you had to figure out?
We're building out greenhouses in the size that have never been built out like this before, including like
because like these are ponds, because you're dealing with ponds, right? Like this isn't your typical greenhouse.
No, it's not like a fancy greenhouse, right? It's like a combination between let's say very cheap and somewhat reasonably affordable. So I think. And you can imagine, so what happened in the beginning is you would maybe attach, let's say, some of the poly to create an insulated greenhouse system. And, one wind gust would come by and it would just stir off everything that was on the greenhouse. And you could start from scratch again, you know what I mean? So these things happen, and you learn the hard way.
Even in San Diego, yes.
This was already in Texas. This was
you had already moved to Texas.
Okay, so this is El Dorado?
Yeah, El Dorado.
So what is it about El Dorado that drew you there?
What drew us to El Dorado? So I think overall, you think, there are certain areas that have the right climate factors to grow plants, right? And so there is a certain relationship between hours of sunlight, temperature, etc. You need to have land, can be arable, non-arable land, doesn't matter. And you need to have some access to fresh water. And so we started to look. Arizona, New Mexico, California was immediately scrapped off the list because it's California, so everything is expensive and it takes a very long period of time to get any form of approval. And so started to look, Louisiana, whatnot, and then we landed we found this plot of land here in West Texas that is on top of an aquifer, so giving us direct access to fresh water. It's part of a 20,000 acre Black Angus ranch. So the story there is that you're slowly converting this Black Angus ranch into a plant-based facility.
That's pretty cool.
It's super flat. You have an airport 40 minutes drive from here, and you have, let's say, the 277 interstate that makes it very easy to provide or get equipment to and from the facility. And then lastly, it's Texas, right? So you build first and you ask later. So you can just start from scratch. And that's what drew us to this place. So from an environmental and a building or construction perspective, it made a lot of sense. Yeah, now we've been in this community for the past 2.5 years, and are the proud sponsors of the local high school football team, the El Dorado Eagles. They finished last in the past 2 seasons, so we need to have some hard conversations with the management.
Now, why haven't you changed them to the El Dorado Lemnas or like?
Yeah, I like this. I like this. I think
come on.
This is a long-term plan. We can't go in with brute force.
That's right. You got to get them to want to change. Yeah.
They have to talk about how they're going to eliminate the competition.
There you go.
Wow. This is okay. This is good. Eliminate. I like it. I think to put things into perspective. So when I just moved there, when we just relocated here, we went to the local cafeteria, which is like a small trailer with a kitchen inside of it, and there was a person sitting there with a T-shirt, "Don't California, my Texas," and he was wearing a revolver on the outside of his pants. And here I was walking in like this tall 6'8" Dutch guy with a hat wearing Plantible, and he's like, "Oh, are you with Plantible?" I was like, "Oh, I was like, oh, maybe it depends on who's asking. It's like, oh, no.
Depends on where your hand is over that revolver.
Yeah. And then he's like, oh, no, thank you so much for coming to West Texas. We're so we're so glad to have you here. And like, I must say, we had to pull some additional power cable, which was going to cost quite a lot of money, which we hadn't really budgeted for. And the local power company assumed all of the costs. So the amount of support that we've been getting from the local community has been really, really phenomenal. And I can tell you from the 6 years in San Diego, we've never received any of that type of support.
Not that kind of love. That's amazing.
When you go to, I love that you guys it seemed like you made a conscious decision to be a part of the ecosystem that you were setting up shop in, right? Like, and then ultimately that meant interfacing with the people, the community, figuring out what their needs are. How do we fit into this? How do we make sure this is a coexisting situation, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and mutually beneficial. So it's not just about like plant-based food, but it's also about like
supporting someone that's come to your community to offer jobs and offer innovation, and if as they succeed, they all succeed with them, and they feel part of it.
And I think obviously this is like one of these towns. So you probably have plenty of them in the United States where they used to generate a lot of income because of oil and gas, but as those wells and fracking starting to dry up, the relative amount of income is starting to decline or decrease, and so the amount of economic opportunities are also decreasing. Right.
So it's and they're looking for diversity in their economies. So, okay, so let's switch to like, you have this, I'm sure these food companies are not just sitting there saying, hey, what's the next cool protein, right? You had to find some initial buyers, and you had to go talk to people and say, yeah, I'm a startup. And I'm sure they're used to working with bigger companies. So how did you find your first few, who are your buyers today? Maybe you want to talk about how you found some of those buyers, and how do you see your go-to-market scaling as you go?
Great question. So I think the majority of the customers that we're working with today all came in as inbound. I think realistically, if I look about Plantible, we've never really had to worry about market demand. We've always had to worry about, can we create enough product to meet, let's say, the customer's demand? And I think that's been great. What we did differently compared to some of the other companies in the industry, and this was one of the best pieces of advice we got, was when we had our first board meeting ever after our seed round. And how it goes, you raise a seed round for some reason, people find it interesting, so you post how much money you raised, and TechCrunch write an article, and then suddenly you get people reaching out to you like, hey, can I get a sample, this and that. And the best piece of advice that we got was during the first board meeting. It was not from Manan, by the way, just to clarify that. But I think...
okay, we're going to throw down on that.
Shots fired.
No. Manon's been great. He's become my personal therapist.
They're just, by the way, those guys are amazing. They will do anything they can to support you.
They are the best. They're like my favorite investor on the cap table for sure, 100%. But I think so this was somebody else, and she said, instead of focusing on these smaller companies, right? So you saw a lot of, let's say, these plant-based companies going with, let's say, food service restaurants and whatnot, to just focus on the largest companies you have in your funnel at the moment, because they're slow, but you're also very slow, right? And whether you can sell to a restaurant or a small bakery or whatever, nobody really cares about it because it's not really meaningful revenue. If you want to justify that you need to build out a large commercial facility, you need to work with these large multinational food companies in order to get their approval. And so we did. So if you think about our go-to-market, it was a little bit counterintuitive, where we didn't really focus on the fast and early adopters. We actually focused on working with, let's say, these large multinational behemoths that are super slow, but so are we, because we had to go from lab to pilot and then from pilot to commercial. And I think to really focus on that scaling up and the technological development, we deprioritized those maybe sexier customers from a small scale perspective, and really prioritized the largest food companies in the world.
Because they're going to give you all the requirements that you need to really grow and scale with them. The smaller ones, like you say, this is a thing I went through in my own company's evolution, right? You go to a lot of startups, and they will criticize you, but a lot of the criticisms is really a reflection of themselves, as opposed to what it takes to make the market. Right. Sometimes people are they're overconfident about what they can achieve, and when you don't achieve what they expect because they're unrealistic, they then reflect upon you, right? Whereas if you go to some of the bigger ones, are more likely to use your product at scale, they're going to tell you here's really what it really takes, especially if they buy into your solution.
Yeah, well, like I mean, don't forget also with a lot of, let's say, these smaller food companies, right? The one who created the first product is still running the company, and so for you then to
Wow.
come in and say like, "Hey, listen, product has some flaws,
Yeah.
but we can help you," they're like, "Wait, what are you talking about?"
It's like a personal front.
It's personal, yeah, it's personal.
Yeah.
So what we did there is just like really focus, like I said, on these large food companies, and that eventually paid off into long-term, multi-million-dollar commercial offtake agreements that we're
That's
now
awesome.
started to fulfill from our facility in Texas. Yeah.
But I'm sure the barrier to entry to them was higher, right? Like you had a bigger hurdle to start out with.
Yeah.
So how do you like swallow the pill there to do that?
Yeah, it's a good question, right?
Or maybe your investors helped you get introductions to them too. I mean, that can happen.
Yeah,
it just depends.
I mean, like in the beginning, we had a lot of just natural organic inbound, which probably came along with some of the PR that comes with you fundraising and whatnot, or maybe participating in a certain accelerator or something like that.
So sparking conversation about you is really what drew curiosity for these folks for it to be more inbound.
Yeah, for sure. And like especially like these larger food companies, they have whole research divisions that also need to have something to do, right? And so they're just scouting, looking for new ingredients, and like, okay, can we do something with that? And that then, to your point, they have very strict standards. So you do it in the lab. They're like, okay, cool, show me that you can do it at pilot scale. Then you're like super proud. Hey, look, I made this at pilot scale. And they're like, okay, great for you, good for you. Now do it at commercial scale, right? Commercial scale. So you have to jump through all of these hoops in a relative short time frame. But to your point, like all of the certifications that come along with being able to sell to a large food company, you're preempting that by closely working with them and not shying away from those conversations in the early days. Right? So,
that's amazing. Great. This is so much fun to learn about. So, Sandeep, I think you want to move us to...
Speaking of shying away from things, let's test your mettle right now. We're about to have you enter the Spark Tank. Okay, this is the show game that I produced. The stakes are incredibly high. So welcome, Tony. And welcome back to our listeners, our fellow entrepreneurs and digital hustlers, to the Spark Tank, where two founders enter and one realizes that their revenue reports are so full of shit that they should be compost. Today, we are putting your knowledge of superfoods and nutrition to the test. All right. So in one corner, we've got Tony Marten, the co-founder of Plantible, that is creating a plant-based protein that's going to make Popeye ditch his spinach. And then we've got my brother Rajiv, who thinks spirulina is the latest Disney princess. So
it's not.
Yeah, it turns out it's not. So what we're doing for this game, we're going to be serving up 3 statements about superfoods. 2 of them are true. 1 is a fabrication that's spicier than that one surprise shishito pepper. So let's see who can separate the wheatgrass from the chaff. All right, so we're going to do 3 rounds here. 2 truths and a lie, all about superfoods, Tony. And frankly, I'm rooting for you. Okay, you ready? Any questions?
All good. Let's go.
Number 1, this is all about unlikely superfoods, okay? Aloe vera. Did you guys know that Cleopatra herself used aloe vera as part of her beauty routine? It's been said that she even bathed in it. It's not just for sunburns. Aloe vera is packed with vitamins and minerals that promote healthy skin and digestion. So number 1 is Cleopatra used aloe vera in her beauty routine. Number 2, during the Renaissance, radishes were believed to contain a rare mineral that enhanced cognitive function and memory. And scholars and artists would often consume large quantities of radishes in hopes of unlocking their full intellectual potential.
Wait, radish? You're just saying that's as a superfood.
Yeah, these are just like
superfood.
Historical superfoods. Number 3 is the beetroot. This vibrant root isn't just for borscht, people. In ancient Rome, beetroot was considered an aphrodisiac. And even today, it's known to boost blood flow and stamina to all over the body, to certain parts of the body. Plus, it contains nitrates that may help improve athletic performance. All right, so which of these is the lie? Is it the aloe vera plant all over Cleopatra, the radish, or the beetroot? Here we go. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold your fingers. Okay. Rajiv went with aloe vera. And then Tony went with radish. Tony, you are correct. That's right. There was no radishes in the Renaissance helping them, helping the
Sorry,
scribes
got the
scribble. Yeah, so well done. You're out to a great start. Yeah, you're leaving my brother in the dirt, so to speak. Here we go. Round number 2. All right, chia seeds. These tiny powerhouses were staple foods for ancient Aztecs and Mayans who believed they provided superhuman energy and endurance so their warriors could run for days. Kombucha, this fizzy fermented drink, isn't just a hipster trend. It's been around for centuries, with origins tracing back to ancient China, where it was prized for its health benefits and called the, quote, immortal health elixir. Or number 3, during the Black Plague, cinnamon was believed to be a potent cure for the disease. People would wear cinnamon-filled pouches around their necks or burn cinnamon incense in their homes to ward off the plague's deadly effects. Which of these is full of fertilizer? Chia seeds, kombucha, or cinnamon? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. Rajiv said kombucha. Tony is saying cinnamon. Tony is 2 for 2.
What?
And has pulled way out ahead here.
Now I can't win. It's
You're
over.
dying on the vine, buddy. You're dying on the vine.
I'll try to make good on one of these.
Yeah, I mean, well, luckily this last round is double the points.
Double the point. Oh, double
Really?
or nothing.
Yeah, I just decided to make it interesting.
It's like double jeopardy.
Yeah. All right, here we go. You ready?
Yes.
I mean, and by the way, have you like researched all these things? Like, do you actually know this stuff? Because you're very confident in your answering so far.
That's what the VC
well,
said.
I'm just like what I'm doing is I'm just going. Let's say you go to like a juice bar, like, and you get a juice. What's in those juices, right? And like cinnamon,
Not radishes.
It's not radishes for sure, but it is beetroot. It is beetroot. And
beetroot. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And cinnamon, even though it has a pleasant, you would think if cinnamon would be a superfood, right? They would like make everything cinnamon, but because it's not an unpleasant flavor. But
they don't do it. Wow. Okay, so revealing his secrets to you, Rajiv. Let's see if you can come back
That's
using
it.
it. I think it's going to be tough to apply it to this third round, to be honest, because this is about the strange but true. Number 1 is about Casu Marzu, the Sardinian cheese infamous for containing live insect larvae. The larva's digestive processes breaks down the cheese, giving it a soft, creamy texture and a unique pungent flavor. It's considered a delicacy by some, and it's also illegal to sell commercially due to health concerns, even though they claim it is packed with protein.
what is this called? Casu Maza?
Casu Marzu. Yeah, no looking it up on ChatGPT.
No,
I see what you're doing. Okay, number 2. In traditional Korean medicine, regurgitated, this is a bird, Swiftlet food. Okay, regurgitated swiftlet, so literally mama bird food. It possesses potent rejuvenating properties that are dissolved in a special elixir, which is consumed to improve skin elasticity and slow down the aging process. Or number 3, Kopi Luwak coffee. Okay, I'm just reminding you that 2 of these are true. Kopi Luwak coffee. The Indonesian coffee is renowned for being the most expensive in the world, and its unique flavor comes from coffee beans, and I'm not kidding, that have been eaten and excreted by civet cats and then sifted through and harvested. Apparently, the digestive process is said to alter the beans, creating a smoother, less bitter coffee. So, which of these is the lie? Is it the larvae processed Casu Marzu cheese, the Korean medicine regurgitated from swiftlet birds, or the Kopi Luwak coffee, which is literally pooped out by civet cats and consumed by people who have a lot of money that want to drink coffee, the most expensive lattes in the world? 1, 2, or 3. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Let me see it. Well, Rajiv said it's the larva. That's BS. Tony said it's the swiftlet regurgitated mama birding aging remedy. And Tony, you are 3 for 3. You did it. You're clearly in the right field. I'm investing in Plantible as soon as it goes public. I mean,
I'm staying in.
Well done. Yeah, don't eat a meal with Rajiv, because who knows what
I'm just going to
you.
keep eating.
Did you know those? How come you were so confident about the Korean
last
medicine?
one? I mean, like, I thought like the Korean one, if it would be true, I must have heard of it, right?
Yeah.
Because like we have like a Korean investor on our capital, and I went out for dinner, and they would have told me like, oh, we have this specialty in Korea. You don't want to believe what it is, right? Not that I've ever heard of this larva cheese, but
I will say this: you can do a little research, Tony, because there is in fact that they do use swiftlet nests which are built by hardened saliva, and that is used in certain Korean medicines. I just changed it a little bit to be about the mama birding thing because I thought that was funny and what was more of a lie. So there is an actual element of truth in that.
I figured the mama bird feeds her babies.
Yeah, by regurgitating the food.
Regurgitating food, and so then people would be like, "Oh yeah,
exactly. There must be some health benefit to this."
That's right. Whereas
that's exactly why
I knew number 3 was definitely a truth.
Yeah.
So
you guys knew about that?
Yeah, I knew.
I did not. Yeah,
it was a 50-50. So. Congratulations, Tony. That was awesome.
Well done.
We do have a couple quick questions for you. So did you know, you said you did some agriculture, you did some commodity trading before. Did you, like growing up, always know you wanted to start a company or a technology company? And how did you discover that passion? Was it someone in your life?
Well, like both my parents are entrepreneurs, so I more or less grew up in and my grandfather was an entrepreneur, so I more or less grew up in like an entrepreneurial family. So I think from the beginning I always aspired to start my own company, right? Did I know where I wanted to do it in? Not really. So after I graduated business school, I didn't really know what to do, so I joined like a boutique consultancy firm and started to do projects in the food and ag space, which then, we developed at one point a 2020 strategy for a Southern German commodity company. And then they hired me to execute or help execute this 2020 strategy, which then really gave me hands-on experience in the field of agricultural commodities. Yeah. So and then I was doing that, did that for 3 years, grew the company from $1 to $7 billion, which was an exciting time. But then afterwards, it really started to consolidate and become just a large multinational food company. With nothing wrong with that, but
so your food. You know your food industry.
Yeah. And I think as you realize the importance of commodities in day-to-day life, I mean, it's quite cool if you can really innovate and build something that can make a long-lasting impact, right? And I think what's funny is that the journey is, in the beginning, you're excited about the impact you can make by creating a new ingredient, and then you walk the grocery aisle and you see your ingredient and all kinds of stuff. But I think now, after building the Ranchito, it's much more about enabling rural communities to go through, let's say, or be part of the green transition as well, right? That it's much more about being able to give these people new opportunities in life and make them part of the transition instead of having to fear about the transition itself. And I think that's become much more of a greater cause for me, at least personally.
Was there is there a family member that said to you something that helped spark you or drive you? Was there a motto
to start a company?
To just inspired you?
Like I find that really hard to say. I think if I go back long enough, I remember being like in early teenage years, and I would always read a lot of books. And for some reason, I bought like this autobiography of Jim Rogers, who was like this old school trader in Forex and then also commodities later on. And he was talking in his book about, let's say, agriculture and land ownership and how it's going to become such an important asset class because of, the urbanization. So the move from people going from rural farmland to cities, who's going to go left, produce food. And so I think maybe that always stuck in the back of my mind. I was like, okay, this could be like a very impactful industry considering all of the threats but also positive opportunities that are there. Like if I look back at my time, maybe that's what got me eventually into this space. And then, from like, to give you an idea, like my mom, she had her own advertising agency. Then she sold that, and then she decided to open up her own fresh pasta store chain in the Netherlands. And then she was like, okay, I'm done with this. Now I want to become a yoga teacher in Spain. And so then she became a yoga teacher in Spain. And then she's like, okay, now I want to become, let's say, an interior designer in Portugal. So then she moved to Portugal. And then now she's decided she wants to become a chef. So anyway, that's more of like the entrepreneurial journey that I grew up with in my household.
Cool.
Just to do
but it seemed like food and health and stuff like that was, big in her life and sort of maybe made its way down to you.
Yeah,
well.
I think so. Yeah, cool. I think so. But more just like if you just go do your own thing and create your own degrees of freedom. I think that's probably what then triggered me doing, something entrepreneurial. But
Right.
that was like led me to building a Lemna farm in Texas. I don't know, but it definitely inspired me. Yeah.
That's
In
an
your Breaking Bad
amazing.
RV.
Yes.
And it keeps going. Keeps going. So,
That's awesome.
and, a lot of entrepreneurs, they have a certain thought in mind as to where they want to take the company.
Mhm.
What do you see this as?
Yeah, good question. I think if I look at Plantable, I think our vision from the beginning was to create like a new form of agriculture, right? So we're doing two things. On the one hand, we're creating, let's say, a way of cultivating novel aquatic plants that goes beyond, let's say, the amount of plants we're growing today. I think we're growing, around 128 plants out of a 30,000 edible plants in the planet. So as you can see, there's like a huge white space to tap into novel plants, or specifically in the aquatic space. So we're trying to unlock that, and then at the same time, we're trying to develop processes that allow us to unlock these valuable components that can be found in these novel plants. And so, if I think about Plantable, our first focus is obviously on creating a product that food companies or consumers want to eat or consume or use. And then the second step is actually becoming more of that manufacturing platform developer that then allows us to create, let's say, almost like this blueprint, or let's say IKEA building package of building the cultivation systems, building the processing systems, and then copy and paste that all over the world, really allowing regions across the world to develop their own supply chains and thereby unlock access to micronutrients regionally, instead of being prone to climate prone or
That's awesome.
geopolitically centralized food systems.
And finally,
Wow,
if you were
that's
to give some advice to the next budding entrepreneur,
the next Tony,
other than being born to two amazing entrepreneurial parents, what would you give them?
I think like one of the one of the quotes that I really liked that I heard a couple of years ago, like fortune favors the bold, right? I think like when we started with this idea in the Netherlands, in the Netherlands we have a saying, act normal and you act crazy enough. So when we went out with our pitch, everybody's like, what's going on in your mind, and what's wrong with you? And especially with the aspect of moving to the United States, leaving friends and family behind, But I think if you truly want to accomplish something, I think just go at it and give it everything you got, and don't look back, right? Don't doubt yourself, because in the end, I think if I look at where we are today, I don't think, it would have been possible if we gave in to all kinds of distractions or doubt or fears. It's just, we jumped on a plane, started reaching out to random people on LinkedIn, telling them that we were growing duckweed at a desolated farm in San Diego, and and now here we are. So I think my feedback is that as a human being, there's always a lot of doubt. There's always a lot of anxiety. Am I the right person? Can I do this? I think I'm not a scientist, and here I'm running a scientific company.
Scientific,
you know what I mean?
company,
And so,
going through
So,
every
and
stage.
how do you say that? How do you say that in Dutch? The phrase.
Doe maar normaal, dan doe je al gek genoeg. Yeah. So now you. Yeah.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Doe je normaal, doe je kloek.
Yeah,
Close?
perfect. Yeah, it was not bad.
Pretty good.
It was not bad. Yeah.
Gezellig. How about that?
Yeah, gezellig. Yeah, very good.
I love how you turned that on.
Goodbye.
So, Tony,
Goodbye.
thank you for joining us today. I thought it was fantastic. You're really illuminating, super fun to learn about the innovation you're creating with Plantable and just learning about who you are as a person. I will not hold it against you that you beat me roundly today. I will still have a beer with you anytime. So when you're in the Bay Area, please come up and say hello.
Awesome. Likewise. If you guys are in El Dorado, Texas, let me know.
All right. I'll be in Austin.
Sure.
Austin in October. So I'll see you
Okay.
there.
I'll bring my own revolver. This is lovely. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you so much.
All right, cool conversation with Tony. I am now hungry,
I'm hungry too.
so I need to eat some food. But what are you feeling? What's your takeaway from it?
Well, I'm gonna go get myself a bag of Rubisco and mix it in with my edamame crunchies and enjoy myself. No, but I really learned a lot from Tony and what he's up to and how he went about building his business. And he had prior experience. He had this incredible entrepreneurial set of influences on his life, and he turned all that into this great company. And I think his advice, the Sun Tzu thing about burn all your bridges or burn all your boats and go for it, and don't look back, don't regret, don't second guess. I think it's just fantastic. That's fantastic advice for anyone, and for myself especially. So I appreciate the thinking behind it and how he's really transforming a field where there's a lot of competition and a lot of maybe information that isn't clear. So
yeah, and I love that you you obviously had experience in this field, but you don't have to necessarily be the scientific expert to want to just dive in and end up leading a company that, like you said, is a very scientifically based company. I think that's really cool. I feel like there's also this element of making use of being an opportunist, making use of when you talked about having free access to this spot down in San Diego, and just kind of figuring out ways to make use of what sort of the river's bringing to you to get a little jump start for whatever your mission is. Tony Robbins, one of his quotes is you don't lack resources, you lack resourcefulness. That's finding opportune ways to be resourceful. That was my take.
That was a great story about the pandemic where they used that as an advantage for them to get ahead of their competitors, where others had to go slower. They could move faster because they created a pod. So a lot of rich, interesting responses. And this is another immigrant. It's another great immigrant entrepreneur story. And I love hearing about it and learning about it. And I hope it gets into many of our foods many of the time. And from what he was telling us, we're not even going to know it half the time. We're just going to know that our food is better. And it's really exciting. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the pod today, please take a moment to rate it and comment. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere podcasts can be found.
This show is produced by Sandeep Parikh and Anand Shah, production assistance by Taryn Talley, and edited by Sean Marr and Aidan McGarvey.
I'm your host, Rajiv Parikh from Position Squared. We're a leading AI-centric growth marketing company based in Silicon Valley. Come visit us at position2.com.
And this has been an Effin' Funny production.
We'll catch you next time. Remember, folks, be ever curious.